Hello everyone. Good morning. I hope you're all doing well. Prateek, Abhiram, Happy New Year guys. आवाज आ रही है तो please let me know. Good morning. Same to you. चलिए. Good morning. Good morning. Right. Now in our previous lecture we had discussed Humayun and now we are going to talk about Sher Shah Suri. He was emperor of India between 1540 to 1545. Now, how is Sher Shah remembered in history? तो कई सारे historians ने अपने opinions दिए हैं regarding this. While some have opined that he combined within his personality the qualities of the fox and the lion. Another popular opinion about him is that he was the forerunner of Akbar. Another popular opinion about him that he, rather than Akbar, was the real founder of Mughal power in India. While there is a contrasting opinion about him that he was not a real innovator, rather he was simply a reformer. Right? So we will need to investigate these opinions about Sher Shah Suri one by one to form a clear picture about him. But before we do that, let us look very quickly at his early background and rise. क्या बैकग्राउंड है इसका? His grandfather was an Afghan horse trader who came to India during the reign of Sikandar Lodi, the second last Sultan of Delhi. His father Hassan Suri was assigned a small Jagir in सासाराम. कहां पे है ये? बिहार. Why was this done? See, during the reign of Sikandar Lodi, the conquest of Jaunpur had taken place. Okay? Jaunpur is located in eastern UP, but from Jaunpur, a new dynasty had emerged during the last phase of Tughlaq rule, known as the Sharki dynasty. It controlled the whole region of eastern UP as well as parts of western Bihar. ठीक है, तो ये कब हुआ था? Now Sikandar Lodi had reversed this and he had defeated and destroyed the Jaunpur Sultanate, and following this there was a power struggle between the local Jaunpuri nobles and the Afghan nobles or the Lodi nobles. So in order to counterbalance the influence of the local nobles, his Sikandar Lodi's successor, Ibrahim Lodi, began promoting other Afghans in this region, especially those who were not local, right? And it is in this scenario that Sher Shah's father, Hassan Suri, was assigned the Jagir of Sasaram. Okay? It was in this context that Sher Shah Suri thus began his career as a minor nobleman during the last stages of the Delhi Sultanate. ठीक है? Now, when his father was quite old, he gave the responsibility of managing the Jagir of Sasaram to Sher Shah Suri. Right? So it was here that Sher Shah Suri obtained first-hand experience of administration at the lowest levels. Right? And it was through his experiments in his own Jagir that he is going to later formulate new policies regarding local as well as revenue administration. Write down. His experiments at Sasaram would later become the basis of his revenue and local administrative reform. ठीक है. Now, as a minor nobleman within the Lodi Sultanate, Sher Shah Suri was destined to have a very mediocre career. ठीक है, तो कोई एक्स्ट्रॉर्डिनरी करियर उसकी लाइफ में, जिंदगी में अभी तक नहीं लग रहा था कि होगा. But then a major upheaval took place. What was that upheaval? The victory of Babur in the Battle of Panipat and the destruction of the Lodi Sultanate. A major upheaval took place in India's political landscape with Babur's victory over Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat. ठीक है. What happened after this? Babur followed his victory at Panipat with other decisive victories as well, especially the ones at Khanwa, Chanderi, and finally at Ghaggar. What was the effect of these victories on India's politics? क्या हुआ इसकी वजह से? Babur successfully completely destroyed the old balance of power which had settled on the Indian political landscape. ठीक है, तो जब स्टेटस को ब्रेक होता है तो एक पॉलिटिकल वैक्यूम क्रिएट होता है, राइट? नाउ the Mughals are either going to fill that vacuum or somebody new is going to emerge in order to fill that vacuum. So the destruction of the old balance of power by the Babur's victories created the space for the emergence of new contenders for all India dominance. And it was in this scenario that Sher Shah Suri was able to elevate himself by dint of his personal valor and acumen to the office of Badshah of Hindustan. ठीक है? Babur followed this up with victories at Khanwa against Rana Sanga, Chanderi against Medni Rao, and Ghaggar against the Afghans in 1529. ठीक है? Write down. This destroyed the old balance of power destroyed the old balance of power. But before Babur could consolidate the foundations of the Mughal Empire, he died unexpectedly. So the process of consolidation fell on the shoulders of Humayun, who was young and inexperienced. However, before Babur could consolidate the Mughal conquests, He died unexpectedly, creating a volatile political situation. सब पॉइंट लिखो. हुमायूं was constantly challenged both from the west, by whom? Bahadur Shah, the Sultan of Gujarat, and the east, by whom? The Afghans of Bengal and Bihar. Okay. Now, initially, Babur prevailed over both his adversaries. In 1534, he defeated Bahadur Shah of Gujarat. In 1532, he defeated the Afghans of Bengal and Bihar. His victory over Bahadur Shah of Gujarat, however, was relatively incomplete. Because although Bahadur Shah was repelled, he was threatening to invade Agra, he was not able to destroy Bahadur Shah. Okay? However, Humayun had more success against the Afghans in the east. अब अफगान्स के अगेंस्ट उसने क्या किया? जो ट्रेडिशनल पावरफुल अफगान हाउसेस थे, he destroyed all of them. He diminished their strength remarkably. ठीक है? So जो destabilization of the political status quo था, that was more effective in the east rather than the west. So in the west, to a certain degree, the old traditional balance of power was still in place to some extent, but it was completely destroyed in the east. Write down. Humayun thus weakened the traditional Afghan nobility of Bihar and Bengal. Now, following the death of Babur, separate Afghan sultanates had emerged both at Bihar as well as Bengal. Right? In Bihar, a new dynasty had emerged made by a local Afghan noble known as Bahar Khan Nuhani. So this was the short-lived Nuhani dynasty. Now Bahar Khan Nuhani ki service mein there was a person named Farid Khan. Farid Khan would later go on to become Sher Shah Suri. Okay? So Bahar Khan Nuhani had given him the title of Sher Khan for some services rendered to him. Okay? Now, at Bihar, what happened was that Bahar Khan Nuhani died, leaving behind a minor son. His name was Jalal Khan Nuhani. But since he was a child, he was unable to rule himself. तो responsibility किसके ऊपर आई? The king's mother, that was the widow of Bahar Khan Nuhani. However, she herself had no experience of ruling, and therefore she gave the responsibility of acting as regent till her son remained a child to one of the most trusted officials of Bahar Khan Nuhani, that is Sher Shah Suri. Okay? It is in this context that Sher Shah was assigned the regency of Bihar by the king's mother. ठीक है? So, what is his first task going to be? पहले क्या करेगा? पहले सीधे हुमायूं को चैलेंज करेगा या पहले अपने इंटरनल राइवल्स को एलिमिनेट करेगा? पहले इंटरनल राइवल्स को एलिमिनेट करना होगा. बिगेस्ट इंटरनल राइवल Jalal Khan Nuhani. So Jalal Khan Nuhani was gradually made more and more of a puppet in the hands of Sher Shah, right? Ultimately, what happened was that Jalal Khan Nuhani became a major. So he became an adolescent and then a major. There was a great power struggle happening within Bihar. Now, many people were jealous of the sudden rise of Sher Shah Suri, and therefore they instigated Jalal Khan Nuhani to flee from Bihar, flee from the clutches of Sher Shah Suri and escape to Bengal. Bengal mein there was another competing Afghan Sultanate and appealed to the Sultan of Bengal to restore Jalal Khan Nuhani to the throne of Bihar and eliminate Sher Shah Suri. Okay? So this became the occasion for conflict between the Afghans of Bihar, Sher Shah Suri, and the Afghans of Bengal, the Sultanate of Bengal. Next point likho. The fractured Afghan polity of Eastern India prepared the occasion for the emerging conflict between Sher Shah Suri and other powerful Afghan nobles. Full stop. The or can write Jalal Khan Nuhani emerged as the instigator of this conflict and provided Sher Shah with the justification to eliminate all his Afghan rivals. All his Afghan rivals. Is this clear? Sure. Now, what was the nature of his relationship with the Mughals in all this period, during all this time? We are talking about the period from around 1530 to 1537, 1538. किस तरह का relationship था? Look, initially, Sher Shah Suri had forcibly been enlisted in the conflict against the Mughals. ठीक है? We are talking about both the battles of 1529, Battle of Ghaggar, as well as 1532. ठीक है? Now, why are we saying that he had forcibly been enlisted into this conflict? At this point of time, Sher Shah Suri was still a minor figure in the Afghan politics of Eastern India. He was not the biggest playmaker. He was dependent upon the support and pleasure of other more prominent Afghan noble houses and noblemen. तो उनके इशारों पे ये चल रहा था, ये मजबूर था. However, personally, he was not interested in any conflict against the Mughals because he could see the writing on the wall. We are divided, the Mughals are united, they are always going to prevail. Rather, he wanted to use the Mughals in order to propel himself higher and higher within the Afghan nobility. So therefore, on both occasions, after being defeated by the Mughals, बाकी सारे जो अफगान लीडर्स थे उनको तो एलिमिनेट कर दिया गया, बट शेर शाह सूरी वाज ऑलवेज स्पेयर्ड बिकॉज he showed remorse. He made pledges not to raise arms against the Mughals any further. He pledged loyalty to the Mughals at the drop of the hat. ठीक है? तो बहुत opportunistic तरह से बिहेव कर रहा था. अपना जहां पे फायदा होगा वहां पे घुटने टेकने में बिल्कुल भी शर्म नहीं आती थी. ठीक है? That is the idea. On both occasions, after Mughal victory, Sher Shah pledged loyalty and was thus spared and even rewarded. ठीक है? Is this much clear? Now, what happened after these two battles? Humayun became less interested in Eastern India and more interested in Gujarat because the bigger threat was coming from Bahadur Shah. Therefore, the Afghan affairs were largely neglected by the Mughals following the Mughal victory in 1532. Following The victory in 1532, Humayun largely neglected Eastern India, since Bahadur Shah of Gujarat presented a greater threat and this period of respite of neglect from the part of the Mughals provided Sher Shah Suri to consolidate his power in the east. ठीक है? So had it not been for Humayun's preoccupation with Bahadur Shah and consequently his preoccupation with constructing a new capital city at Delhi instead of Agra, because Agra was closer to Gujarat, it was on the trade routes between Gujarat and Malwa and was thus vulnerable to an attack from the south, it would not have been possible for Sher Shah Suri to consolidate his power in the east. ठीक है? अब ये कंसोलिडेशन की पावर कर रहे हैं, एक तो हम प्रोसेस देख चुके हैं, he took advantage of the chaos which had emerged within Afghan politics, especially following the downfall of the Lodi Sultanate. इसने एक और चीज का बहुत अच्छी तरह से यूज किया to his advantage and that was the Afghan law of succession. अब ये अफगान लॉ ऑफ सक्सेशन में ऐसा क्या चीज था which he was able to take advantage of? Now, how would you define or how would you describe Afghan society even today? Is it primarily a tribal society or is it a well-settled, well-established state society, full-fledged? Tribal society है, ठीक है? Now, in any tribal society, are you going to find high levels of inequality or relatively lower levels of inequality? जो सोशियो इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम होता है वो बहुत ज्यादा हायरार्किकल होता है या रिलेटिवली फ्लैट होता है? रिलेटिवली फ्लैट होता है. देयर इज ग्रेटर डिग्री ऑफ इक्वालिटी and this equality is not only between various groups, various ethnicities, but also between the genders. So tribal societies always lend themselves to greater gender equality. And since they are more equal in the context of gender, the privileges enjoyed by women, rights enjoyed by women, respect enjoyed by women in the society is relatively going to be higher as compared to other civil societies or state societies, right? So women enjoy greater respect, privileges and rights. Now, one of the important rights is the right to inheritance. Generally, state societies में what do we get to see? Are women given the right to inheritance, or are they mostly excluded? Excluded. This was not the case in tribal societies, and especially not in the Afghan tribal society. Not only did girls have the right to inherit their father's property, but in fact, widows had the right to inherit their dead husband's property. Instead of the man's living heirs, his sons, the property as well as power enjoyed by the office of their husbands used to pass on to the widows. And this is the unique character of the Afghan law of succession that Sher Shah Suri took ample advantage of. कैसे? देखो, जितने भी यहाँ पर लड़ाइयां हो रही थी, a number of Afghan nobles, very wealthy ones, perished. ठीक है? Now, उनकी सारी प्रॉपर्टी, उनकी सारी पावर, उनकी सारी वेल्थ, that would be transferred directly to their widows. और शेर शाह सूरी क्या करता था? मैं तो कंधा हूं, राइट? तो कंधा पहन के पहुंच जाता था. एंड he would either force these women to marry him or induce them to marry him. He would promise them protection, respect, etc. And they would agree to marry him. And this was used by him in order to gain a great degree of wealth and influence. क्योंकि पैसे के साथ क्या आता है? Power आता है. How did that translate? How did money translate into power during the medieval period? It could be used in order to रेज एन आर्मी. तो सोल्जर्स आप हायर कर सकते हो, उनको इक्विप कर सकते हो. यू कुड कंस्ट्रक्ट अ फोर्ट, यू कुड बाय हॉर्सेस, एलिफेंट्स, कैनन्स खरीद सकते हो, गन्स खरीद सकते हो, गोला बारूद, राइट? So this is going to be used by Sher Shah Suri in order to accumulate not only wealth but also consolidate power in the eastern region. It is going to allow him to eliminate not only his local rivals but later challenge the Mughal Empire as well. ठीक है? Write down. Sher Shah Suri also cunningly used the Afghan law of succession to his own advantage. सब पॉइंट लिखो. In accordance with Afghan customs, the property and powers of a person used to get transferred to his widow instead of his sons. Next sub point. Thus, Sher Shah Suri induced or threatened many of the recently widowed wealthy women of the Afghan aristocracy to marry him. Next sub point. In this way, he obtained large sums of money which was mobilized to raise armies and construct forts. Full stop. Next sub point. Using this newfound wealth, Sher Shah was able to eliminate not only his Afghan rivals but also challenge हुमायूं. ठीक है. Now, by 1538, the power dynamics between Sher Shah Suri and Humayun had also shifted considerably. While Sher Shah's power was peaking in eastern India, Humayun was losing power and losing it rapidly. क्यों? क्या हुआ था? Humayun had reached the peak of his power in 1534 after he defeated Bahadur Shah of Gujarat. Okay? However, following this, there was an internal struggle which emerged within the Mughal Empire between Humayun and his own brothers, primarily his younger brother Kamran. ठीक है? तो कामरान को हुमायूं ने कुछ इलाके दे दिए थे एज हिज ओन किंगडम. कौन सा इलाका दिया था? काबुल और कांधार का इलाका दे दिया था उसे. ठीक है. बट कामरान वॉज नॉट सेटिस्फाइड ओनली विद दिस. He was also eyeing Punjab and Haryana. That is why in 1536-1537 he invaded and occupied these regions, northern Punjab up to Hisar, right up to the outskirts of Delhi. Okay. Now Sher Shah Suri was very cunningly sitting on the sidelines, waiting and watching. He did not want to strike Humayun when his power was at its height, rather when he was weakest. And when did he choose to strike? When the Mughal Empire was internally shattered, so that Humayun would have no hope of recovery. Okay? Write down. The Mughal Empire was experiencing a major crisis by the late 1530s. Humayun and Kamran were locked in an intense war of succession. Full stop. It was now that Sher Shah struck. ठीक है? He dismissed the Mughal officials from Bengal and Bihar. So, till now, Sher Shah Suri was accepting the overall suzerainty of the Mughals, but now he overthrew it. He dismissed the Mughal officials from Bengal and Bihar. This prompted a Mughal response resulting in the Battle of Chausa, 1539. What was the outcome? Mughal victory or a Mughal defeat? Mughal defeat. The Mughals were decisively defeated. Thus ending their influence beyond अवध. ठीक है? अवध के इलाके के बाद मुगल्स की हुकूमत खत्म. ठीक है? What is Sher Shah Suri going to do next? Is he going to again wait and watch, or is he going to strike the killing blow, give the killing blow? अब killing blow देगा, क्योंकि this is the best opportunity. The Mughals are already on the back foot. Their camp is in chaos. Internally, the Mughal Empire is divided, and Humayun's supporters are leaving him. They are fleeing. Confidence in Humayun is flagging down. Okay? So, write down. Sher Shah struck the killing blow by invading the Mughal territory in 1540, resulting in another decisive victory. कहां पर? एट बिलग्राम. दिस इज नियर कन्नौज. ठीक है. एंड विद दिस the road to Delhi was open to the Afghans. All the Mughal forces had been destroyed, and Humayun was no longer a major potentate in North Indian politics. Sher Shah did not want to give him the opportunity to recover, and thus he sent his forces to pursue Humayun. Humayun was driven out of Delhi. He went to Rajasthan, and Sher Shah Suri began to pressurize the Rajput rulers of Rajasthan not to shelter Humayun. तो उनके अगेंस्ट भी कार्रवाई इसने शुरू कर दी. Following this, Humayun was forced to flee to Sindh, and ultimately he had to leave India and flee to Persia. ठीक है. Write down. इसके बाद एक सब पॉइंट. The timing of this conflict was carefully chosen by Sher Shah. The Mughals were yet to recover from the defeat of Chausa, and confidence in Humayun was failing. Following the victory at Bilgram, Sher Shah persisted in pursuing Sher Shah persisted in pursuing Humayun who initially fled to Rajasthan. Full stop. This prompted Sher Shah to begin harassing the local Rajput chiefs not to shelter Humayun. Ultimately, Humayun was forced to flee to Persia via Sindh in 1541. ठीक है. And now that Sher Shah Suri has established control over an extremely vast region covering the whole of Bengal, Bihar, right up to the Vindhyas, the whole of Delhi, Punjab, except for Rajasthan, Malwa, Kashmir, Kabul, Herat and Kandahar, and ये मालवा एंड गुजरात. तो अब लॉजिकली ये सबसे पहले किस रीजन को कंसोलिडेट करने की कोशिश करेगा? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल राजस्थान, देन फॉलोड बाय मालवा, देन फॉलोड बाय पंजाब एंड फाइनली गुजरात. ठीक है. पंजाब में भी ओनली सदर्न पंजाब, नॉट नॉर्दर्न पंजाब और द लैंड inhabited by the अफगान ट्राइबल्स. क्यों? क्योंकि अफगान ट्राइबल्स के लैंड में जाएगा तो अफगानों से ही लड़ाई करनी पड़ेगी. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, his own supporters are not going to be very happy because they are also Afghans. Secondly, he is going to depend upon the support of the locals in order to control this region, in order to pressurize the Rajput chiefs. And thirdly, the Afghans were freedom loving people. He knew he will not be able to control them persistently, right? And therefore better idea would be to leave them to their devices, maintain friendly relations with them, focus upon the other more lucrative regions of India. ठीक है. Namely Rajasthan, Gujarat, Malwa. ठीक. Now his first objective was to control Gujarat, was to eliminate Bahadur Shah. But before he could do that, he had to establish control over the Malwa region, क्योंकि जितने भी रूट्स थे इसको एक्सेस करने के लिए वो मालवा से ही निकल रहे थे, right? And at Malwa, at Chanderi, a local Rajput ruler, Puranmal, had established a powerful nexus. So, Malwa, by this point of time, had been experiencing a fractured polity. यहाँ पे भी ग्वालियर से एक सल्तनत चल रही थी, but that was becoming extremely weak, and Puranmal of Chanderi was expanding his power at the cost of the ruler of Gwalior, right? Now, हुआ क्या? That because Sher Shah Suri was interested in Gujarat, this brought him into conflict with Malwa, with Puranmal. तो लड़ाई हुई काफी देर तक, and finally there was a major siege at Chanderi, the capital fort of Puranmal. ठीक. Now, शेर शाह सूरी का ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था? टू conquer Chanderi with as little losses as possible in as little time as possible. तो sieges are usually very lengthy affairs. 2-3 साल तक भी कई बार चल जाते हैं. Right? He did not have this much time. तो कैसे ये siege को lift करेगा? He opened negotiations with Puranmal और क्या promise किया? That the 4,000 Rajput soldiers and families living within this fort are going to be given safe passage. तो solemn guarantee दिया, कुरान की कसम खाई और बोला कि किसी का भी बाल बांका नहीं किया जाएगा. राजपूतों को लगा कि चलो ठीक है, बोल दिया है बादशाह ने, बात मान लेते हैं. So they left the palace. रात में शेर शाह सूरी का जो टेंट था उसी के बगल में राजपूत का कैंप सेटअप करवाया गया, दावत हुआ, and then in the middle of the night without any warning, large scale slaughter, 4,000 families wiped out. Okay, so this is one instance of how Sher Shah Suri displayed extreme ruthlessness and cunningness when dealing with his rivals. ठीक है. सेकेंड केस हम देखते हैं इन राजस्थान, the state of Marwar. यहाँ पे from Jodhpur a prominent ruler was emerging. His name was Maldev. Right? The presence of a strong Marwar was possibly going to threaten the balance of power once again in North India. So it was important to contain Maldev of Marwar of Jodhpur. तो कैसे हुआ ये? Now there was a conflict between Marwar and Sher Shah Suri. Sher Shah Suri noticed that some of the generals and commanders of Maldev were unhappy with him and seemed to be jealous of him because he was extremely popular, he was also extremely wealthy and powerful. ठीक है. तो अब क्या tactic use करेगा? He began forging letters. In order to further sow discord within the Rajput camp. तो मालदेव के नाम से एक फेक चिट्ठी लिख करके इसने किसी जनरल को भेज दी. उसमें कुछ ऐसा इंस्ट्रक्शन था which would have hurt the interests of another powerful noble or another powerful general. So the mutual suspicions and jealousies which already existed within the Rajput camp, they were further amplified by Sher Shah Suri. And जो राजपूत का कैंप था that also disintegrated. ठीक है. So these are two examples of how Sher Shah Suri displayed the qualities of the lion or fox? Of the fox. But he was also extremely brave. He knew how to take risks. He also displayed great acumen both on the battlefield and off the battlefield. He introduced a number of innovations, and that is why he also displayed the qualities of the lion. तो आगे लिख सकते हो. शेर शाह सूरी carried on the process of empire building by establishing control over Malwa with the siege of Chanderi and Rajasthan with his victory over Malde of Marwar. Full stop. Subpoint. In both cases, he used unscrupulous methods to attain victory. To attain victory. Next subpoint. At Chanderi, the Rajputs were given a solemn promise of safe passage, and then slaughtered in Marwar. Sher Shah sowed discord within the enemy camp through forgeries of letters. Through forgeries of letters. ठीक है? This clear? Next main point. Thus, it would not be incorrect to opine that Sher Shah Suri displayed the qualities of the fox. So, what are those episodes of Sher Shah's life which display these qualities? हमने क्या क्या कवर किया है? यहाँ पे आप समराइज करके लिख भी सकते हो. सबसे पहले his opportunistic strategy towards the Mughals. That is accepting Mughal overlordship during times of weakness and challenging Mughal rule from a position of strength. ठीक है, एक तो ये हो गया. बी, using the Afghan law of succession to accumulate wealth and power. ठीक है. सी, using the atmosphere of political chaos to remove Afghan rivals. D, taking advantage of the preoccupation of Humayun in the West to consolidate power. Finally, using unscrupulous methods to ensure victory against the Rajputs. And one more thing you can add. F, deliberately choosing not to extend his empire in the Pakhtun belt, in the Pakhtun Northwest Frontier Province wala jo region hai, in the Pakhtun belt, in order to conserve goodwill among the Afghans and prevent a conflict against the freedom loving Pashto tribals. ठीक है. This is how Sher Shah Suri combined within his personality the elements of the fox, right? पश्तो ट्राइब से भी थे, खलज ट्राइब से भी थे, बहुत सारे अलग अलग ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स थे. बट बाय दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम नॉर्थ पंजाब और जो पख्तूनख्वा वाला रीजन है वहां पे पश्तो ट्राइबल्स का डोमिनेंस एस्टैब्लिश हो गया था. यानी कि जो सदर्न अफगानिस्तान वाला रीजन है और यानी कि काबुल, कांदाहार, गजना वाला रीजन एंड दिस पेशावर वाला बेल्ट, यहाँ पे पश्तो ट्राइबल्स हैड बीन सेटल्ड बाय दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. Even now, the Pashto language is the most dominant language spoken across अफगानिस्तान. कुछ एरियाज हैं नॉर्दर्न अफगानिस्तान में ऑन द बॉर्डर ऑफ तुर्कमेनिस्तान जहां पर नॉन पश्तो स्पीकर्स रहते हैं, राइट? तो आई एम फॉरगेटिंग कि एग्जैक्टली कौन सा लैंग्वेज वो लोग बोलते हैं, बट इट इज नॉट पश्तो. एंड अगेन जो वेस्टर्न नॉर्दर्न फ्रिंजेस ऑफ अफगानिस्तान है वहां पे भी नॉन पश्तो स्पीकिंग माइनॉरिटीज रहती हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल दी हजाराज एटसेट्रा, यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड ऑफ देम, राइट? तो अफगानिस्तान ऊपर से देखने में बड़ा होमोजेनस लगता है, बट इंटरनली इट इज वेरी डिवाइडेड, राइट? बहुत सारे एथनिक रिलीजियस डिविजन्स हैं लोगों के बीच में, कस्टम्स में डिविजन्स हैं, इवन रेशियल डिविजन्स भी देखने के लिए मिल जाते हैं कई सारे. सो इट इज नॉट अ होमोजेनस सोसाइटी. बट जो सदर्न वाला रीजन है वहां पे पश्तूस का डोमिनेंस है और उस समय भी डोमिनेंस हुआ करता था, राइट? Now we have discussed how Sher Shah Suri had within his personality the elements of the fox. Now, Sher Shah also exhibited the qualities of the lion. कैसे? First of all, his courage is beyond doubt. ठीक है? He was a veteran of many battles and had overcome formidable foes or enemies. Formidable foes. ठीक है? On many occasions, his enemies had a great numerical advantage over his own forces, but this did not deter him from charging into battle. भी लिखो. Sher Shah was equally bold in political maneuvering. ठीक है? He had began his career as a minor Afghan nobleman. And through an extremely risky process, gradually climbed the ranks. Right? So he was constantly putting his neck out. His neck was always threatened. तो अगर बुज़दिल आदमी होगा तो ऐसा रिस्क ले पाएगा? नहीं. He would not be able to risk his life, property and power. He would be satisfied with whatever he had. सी लिखो. शेर शाह was equally brave of the battlefield. His administrative reforms reflect not only his ambition but also his insight. ठीक है? Now he had taken advantage of the Afghan conventions of societal organization in order to gain power. But the same conventions were going to become his biggest weakness when he was a ruler. Therefore, अब उसका priority change हो जाएगा and he is going to try and dismantle the very foundations of his own kingship. ठीक है? By infusing the elements of the Turkish model of kingship within the Afghan theory of sovereignty. तो Afghan theory of sovereignty we had covered ना बहलोल लोदी में. क्या होता था? Was the king looked upon as the supreme ruler? No, he was simply looked upon as the first among equals. जितने भी गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसेज होते थे, मिनिस्टीरियल पोजीशंस होती थी, they were not appointed by the king. They could not be removed by the king. Rather, they were treated as the feudal fiefdoms of different Afghan nobilities. ठीक है? So they were hereditarily passed on from father to son within the same family. Now, Sher Shah Suri wanted to centralize administration. He knew if he wasn't able to do that, the same thing is going to happen to him that had happened to the Lodhis. There is going to be a great degree of infighting. And thus, very boldly, he threw off the conventions of Afghan kingship. Right? So that itself was a very bold step, was a very brave step. His administrative reforms reflect not only his ambition, but also his insight. He boldly discarded the Afghan customs of sovereignty and was this action without any risk? बहुत रिस्की था. Why? because his supporters had supported him with the belief that they are going to be rewarded heavily. Now, the promise of reward hai, they are seeing it evaporate before their eyes. So obviously they are going to be very unhappy. And when nobles are unhappy, the king's life is always in danger. He did not care about that. Okay? Afghan customs of sovereignty, thus risking the ire or anger of his closest supporters. ठीक है डी the same can be said about his revenue reforms. क्या किया इसने? He not only reintroduced the system of survey and measurement that had originally been introduced by Alauddin Khilji, he made further improvements to that system, thus eliminating the powers of the local nobility. ठीक है? So not only was he angering the top Afghan nobility, but even running the danger of alienating the local nobility. So this was once again a very risky proposition. By eliminating the powers of the local nobility, he risked alienating them. Further, Sher Shah's courage is also evident from his monetary reforms and highway construction. ठीक है? So what happens whenever the state takes a drastic expenditure or brings about a drastic change in the economic policy? क्या risk क्या होता है? That the economy may suddenly crash क्योंकि major transformation आया है, the system has received a major shock, so it is going to take some time to recover. ठीक है? This could have potentially threatened the economic health and hence the political health of his newly created system. Economic and hence political health of his state. ठीक है? And the kind of reforms initiated by Sher Shah Suri, it is not that no other ruler in Indian history initiated similar reforms. बट किसने किसने किया ये? अलाउद्दीन खिलजी ने, मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक ने और अकबर ने. All of them had considerably longer reigns as compared to Sher Shah Suri. None of them were bold enough to introduce all these major reforms almost simultaneously. ठीक है? So this also is a testament to Sher Shah's courage. कितने हुए थे अभी? E तक ना? F लिखो. Finally, the rapidity with which Sher Shah implemented his major reforms attests to a level of self-confidence that is unmatched in Indian history. Full stop. Other rulers like Akbar, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and Alauddin Khilji, who initiated similar reforms, did so over considerably longer periods than Sher Shah's short reign of only 5 years. And Sher Shah's short reign of only 5 years. Clear है इतना? क्या? Quality of? हाँ. सस्टेन कर पाए या नहीं कर पाए. ओके, सो दैट इज अ क्वेश्चन दैट वी कैन नॉट रियलिस्टिकली आंसर, क्योंकि शेरशाह सूरी तो खत्म हो गया 5 साल के बाद, राइट? तो हिस्ट्री में वो व्हाट इफ वाला वो नहीं रहता है, कोई भी क्या बोलते हैं, क्वेश्चन नहीं रहता है. एंड if we see later on that Akbar, what he did was not introduce any new or completely new reforms. Rather, he simply made innovations and improvements on the foundations that Sher Shah Suri had already established. ठीक है? So अभी एक और ओपिनियन है ना about Sher Shah Suri that he was the forerunner of Akbar. तो इसी वजह से आता है that all the reforms that we give the credit for to Akbar for, they were actually initiated by Sher Shah Suri. Akbar ने उनमें कुछ minor modifications, improvements किए, and then he successfully implemented them, and they became the basis for the endurance of the Mughal Empire बिकॉज वही जो सिस्टम अकबर ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया दैट लास्टेड राइट अप टू औरंगजेब. And what happened between Akbar and Aurangzeb's reign? The Mughal Empire expanded rapidly. It also reached the peak of its power, prestige, wealth, and strength. So economic conditions be stable rahe. India also gained a prominent place in global trade, right? तो वो सारा फाउंडेशन अकबर ने क्रिएट किया, बट अकबर्स ओन रिफॉर्म्स वर बेस्ड ऑन शेरशाह सूरीज रिफॉर्म्स. सो हम इनडायरेक्टली जज कर सकते हैं कि शेरशाह सूरी के पास खुद अगर और टाइम होता, सो ही मे हैव हिमसेल्फ इंट्रोड्यूस्ड ऑल दोज मॉडिफिकेशंस व्हिच वर लेटर इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय अकबर. ठीक है. सो लेकिन ये कहना कि अब पता नहीं काम करते या नहीं करते, आई थिंक दैट वुड बी अनफेयर. Because Sher Shah Suri तो था नहीं on the scene any longer, right? Had the system failed within his time, then we could have blamed him. Okay? हाँ, ये काम नहीं किया. For example, मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक ने similar reforms introduce किए थे. All his reforms failed. Blame किसको किया जाता है? We blame मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक. That the way in which he implemented these reforms, the conditions during which he implemented these reforms, India was not ready. During Sher Shah's period, India was ready, and this is proved by the success of similar reforms during Akbar's reign and the following period. ठीक है. So this last वाला जो ये है ना, this is a valid argument कि हाँ, this displayed his boldness. Take down a question. Sher Shah Suri combined within his personality the qualities of both the lion and the fox. Full stop. Discuss. 200 words, 15 marks. ठीक है, हो जाएगा ये. Now, of course, you need more information regarding his administrative, revenue, military, highway वाला जो infrastructure है उसके बारे में, right? So next we are going to talk about Sher Shah Suri's reforms. कौन कौन से रिफॉर्म्स देखने हैं हमें? नंबर 1 is administrative reforms, including reforms in central administration, provincial and sub-provincial administration, and finally local administration. And secondly, we need to address his economic reforms. Namely, in revenue administration, in the monetary system, when it came to the promotion of trade and commerce through the construction of highways and sarais, along with rationalization of the customs regime. And then finally, we have some other miscellaneous reforms, namely reforms in military administration, changes brought about in law and order machinery, etc. ठीक है, ये हमको डिस्कस करना है. Excuse me for a couple of minutes, I'll be right back. Sorry about that, guys. आवाज आ रही है ना ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स? Am I audible, guys? All right, thank you. First of all, we are going to address the administrative reforms of Sher Shah Suri. सबसे पहले in the field of central administration. Now, while Sher Shah Suri continued the old administrative structure that existed during the time of the Delhi Sultanate, which had initially been introduced by Balban, that is the portfolio system of administration, with different departments being created for taking care of different subjects of administration. तो वो स्ट्रक्चर उसने अडॉप्ट किया, वो कंटिन्यू किया, उसमें कोई चेंज नहीं किया, बट that system had undergone massive changes over time from the period of Balban to the period of the Lodhis. By the time of the Lodhis, the Afghan convention of kingship had become dominant, wherein the different departments and ministries were seen as the personal property of the office holder, and thus it could be passed on to the successors of the office holder. Now that had to be ended because Sher Shah Suri wanted to centralize administration. His biggest challenge was eliminating the Afghan theory of kingship and replacing it with the Turkish model of kingship. Okay? So write down. Sher Shah Suri's objective was to eliminate the Afghan convention of kingship in which the ruler was seen simply as the first among equals. Full stop. Next point. Rather, he wanted to introduce a highly centralized system based upon the Turkish model. Based upon the Turkish model. Full stop. Next point. As such, Sher Shah retained the traditional Diwan system of portfolio administration with the same nomenclature. Okay? So even in Sher Shah's system, you had departments such as the Diwane Wizarat, Diwane Arz, Diwane Insha, Diwane Risalat, जो बलबन ने इंट्रोड्यूस किए थे शुरुआत में. However, write down. However, he infused a new spirit into this arrangement. He infused a new spirit into this arrangement. Full stop. Next point. He clearly proclaimed or clearly declared that the Afghan customs would not apply to government positions. Would not apply to government positions. ठीक है? Rather, comma, all central government officials would be appointed removed transferred and paid by the emperor himself. By the emperor himself. Is this clear? Sure. Next लिखो. Further, he also abandoned the practice of appointing a वकील उस सल्तनत. कौन होता था ये? प्राइम मिनिस्टर और चीफ मिनिस्टर. टू मैनेज and coordinate the government. So in the absence of this official, a prime minister who had the responsibility to manage and coordinate government day-to-day administration, the emperor himself was responsible. Instead, Sher Shah assumed this responsibility personally. And what was the effect? That there would be no intermediary between the emperor and his ministers. The emperor would be in direct and constant contact with his ministers and thus could manage the internal affairs of their individual departments personally without the need for any intervention by a third official. This allowed Sher Shah to personally oversee all aspects of administration and maintain a check on the ministers. Maintain a check on the ministers. ठीक है? Another strategy adopted by Sher Shah Suri to counter the influence of the prominent Afghan nobles who were growing increasingly disenchanted with his policy of centralizing control was to promote some of the rivals of the Afghans. कौन होंगे ये? The newly arrived Irani and Turani nobles जो कि मुगल्स के साथ आए थे, और उसके अलावा राजपूत्स. ठीक है? To check the influence of the Afghani nobles Sher Shah adopted the practice of promoting non-Afghans to important positions, including Turanis, Iranis, and Rajputs. ठीक है? Turanis, Iranis and Rajputs. तो ये हो गया सेंट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में रिफॉर्म्स. क्या फोकस है? सेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ पावर and divesting power from the Afghan nobles. For this, what strategies have been used? Afghan customs of succession have been rejected when it comes to government positions. All appointments, transfers, removals and salaries are going to be made in the name of the emperor directly by him. The emperor did not have any prime minister, thus managed the affairs of the state directly, was in constant contact with his ministers and thus could maintain effective check on them. And the composition of the nobility was also altered in order to counterbalance the powerful Afghan factions. Next, the provincial and sub-provincial administration. Right. Now, during the Delhi Sultanate period, the empire did not have any standardized system of provincial administration. So the empire was not divided into regular provinces. Uniformity at provincial level was not visible. Rather, a few districts or shiks were collected and categorized as a khitta or vilayat. Governed by an official known as Mukti or Wali. A khitta or vilayat consisted of several territorial units, which were units of revenue as well as administration, known as Sikhs, governed by an official known as a Sikhdar. Right? Now, initially, Iltutmish had introduced this system, and the Sikhdars were appointed directly by the Sultan. But gradually, this power was transferred to the local nobility. Muktis and Walis began appointing their own officials at this level and at the lower levels. Sikhs were further divided into revenue circles known as Parganas, where a revenue collector known as Amil had the responsibility of collecting revenue from the villages and remitting it to the superior official at the Sikh level, who used to remit it to the Mukti. And finally, the lowest unit of administration was the village or Gaon, which had officials such as the Khut or Mukaddam, acting as the village headman. Okay? He was in charge of both revenue collection at the village level as well as maintenance of law and order and administration of rural justice. However, he was not appointed by any of the superior officials. Rather, the position of village headman was a traditional, hereditary, and local one. So, villagers themselves, through historical traditions, chose their own village headman. उनकी पोजीशन को केवल स्टेट रिकग्नाइज करता था. दिस वाज द सिस्टम अंडर द दिल्ली सल्तनत. नाउ what are the changes that Sher Shah Suri is going to make? He is not going to make any changes at the provincial level. The khitta or vilayat is going to remain intact, with muktis and walis enjoying extraordinary powers. Okay? In fact, standardized provincial administration was not introduced till the time of Akbar. So it is Akbar who should be given the credit for establishing the Suba system, जहां पे element of separation of powers को भी introduce किया गया था. Where Sher Shah Suri did make a major intervention was at the sub-provincial levels of administration. इस level पे और इस level पे. The Sheikh was renamed as the Sarkar. ठीक है? And instead of a single Shikdar having oversight over both general administration as well as revenue administration, the element of separation of powers was introduced, with two officials now being given two separate responsibilities. An official known as Shikdar A Shikdaran had the responsibility of general administration and maintenance of law and order. Whereas an official of equal rank known as Munsif-e-Munsifan was given the responsibility of revenue administration. ठीक है? Now, these officials, unlike their predecessors at the Sikh level, were not appointed by the local Mukti or Wali. They were appointed directly by the emperor himself. In all, Abbas Khan Sarwani, the author of the Tarikh-e-Sher Shahi, mentions that Sher Shah Suri carved out 66 such distinct districts or sarkars. Every sarkar was further subdivided into parganas, several parganas. Now, during the Sultanate period, Pargana was not an administrative unit. It was only a revenue unit. It was simply a revenue circle. And thus only a revenue official known as Amil or Munsif. Now, Parganas were reconstituted as both revenue as well as administrative units. And the same system of separation of powers, which is visible at the Sarkar level, is also going to be visible at the Pargana level. तो यहाँ पे सिकदार ए सिकदारान और मुंसिफ ए मुंसिफान है. यहाँ पे कौन से ऑफिशियल्स होंगे? सिंपल सिकदार एंड मुंसिफ. Shikdar responsible for general administration, law and order, and Munsif responsible for revenue administration. ठीक है? और इसके सुपीरियर लेवल पर शिकदार है सिकदारन, सिकदारों का शिकदार, और मुंसिफ है मुंसिफान, मुंसिफों का मुंसिफ. ठीक है? सो ये अरेंजमेंट परगना लेवल पे किया. एट द विलेज लेवल, गांव ऑल्सो there was no major change. The Khut or Mukaddam remained responsible for revenue collection, its remission, as well as maintenance of law and order at the local level. ठीक है? तो write down, लिखो. As far as standardized provincial administration is concerned, comma, it was not introduced till the reign of Akbar. Who began the practice of dividing the empire into began the practice of dividing the empire into standardized subas, with royally appointed officials or with royally appointed governors. Full stop. Instead, next point. Instead, Sher Shah continued the Sultanate structure of dividing the empire into khittas or vilayats, governed by hereditary nobles known as muktis or walis. Nobles known as muktis or walis. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. However, Sher Shah introduced a major innovation in sub-provincial administration. By reconstituting six into sarkars within brackets districts with royally appointed officials known as the Sikdare-Sikdaran, within brackets you can write responsible for general administration, and Munsif-e-Munsifan, within brackets responsible for revenue administration. Sikdare-Sikdaran responsible for general administration and Munsif-e-Munsifan responsible for revenue administration. Full stop. In this way, he established a direct link between the center and local administration. ठीक है, सब पॉइंट इसमें लिखो. At the same time, comma, he ensured proper checks on these officials through the system of separation of powers, and by transferring them regularly at an interval of 2 to 3 years. तो हर 2-3 साल में इन दोनों ऑफिशियल्स का ट्रांसफर हो जाता था. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. अकॉर्डिंग टू अब्बास खान सारवानी, ओवर हियर आई एम राइटिंग. According to Abbas Khan Sarwani, comma, the author of the Tarikh-e-Sher Shahi the author of the Tarikh-e-Sher Shahi, comma, Sher Shah had divided the region of Bengal into 66 sarkars. Full stop. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. The Pargana of the Sultanate period, which used to be a purely revenue unit, was reconstituted as a revenue and administrative unit. With a revenue official, munsif, and a law and order official, shikdar, and a law and order official or shikdar. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. At the village level, that is gaon, the traditional village headmen known as khut or muqaddam were allowed to continue. ठीक है. Is this clear? And lastly, we come to the local or village administration. Now, one thing we have already seen is that the khut or muqaddam were allowed to continue their traditional duties, such as revenue collection, policing, and administration of justice. But they were also divested of some of their traditional powers. They lost the power of revenue assessment, Sher Shah Suri introduced a system of survey and measurement in which royally appointed officials used to visit the villages personally in order to oversee the process of revenue estimation. लैंड का मेजरमेंट और उसका सर्वे रॉयल ऑफिशियल्स के सुपरविजन में होता था, राइट? एंड this traditionally was one of the rights of the khut or mukaddam. So they lost this right. Secondly, changes were also introduced when it came to their policing responsibilities. Sher Shah Suri had erected an elaborate system of highways and sarais in order to promote trade and commerce. Biggest threat to this trade and commerce क्या था? सेफ्टी कंसर्न्स, नेमली हाईवेज के ऊपर होने वाली रॉबरी, राइट? एंड जहां पे भी रॉबरी हो रही है, जहां पे भी डकैती हो रही है, और फिर मर्डर टेक्स प्लेस और सम थेफ्ट टेक्स प्लेस, नाउ इट वाज द रिस्पांसिबिलिटी ऑफ द लोकल मुकद्दम to find the culprits, and if they were not able to find the culprits, then they are going to receive the same penalty as the thief would have received. Okay, so when it came to policing powers, also local responsibility was assigned for local crime. ठीक है? And finally, in order to ensure that at the time of collecting revenue, the khuts and mukaddams are not over collecting, the peasants were now issued legal protections in the form of legal documents such as patta and kabuliyat. ठीक है? So this prevented the local elites, the khuts and mukaddams, from accumulating inordinate amounts of wealth and harassing the peasants. Okay, so this curtailed their powers to a great degree. And finally, as part of his revenue machinery, Sher Shah Suri insisted upon the proper maintenance of revenue and land records at the village level. So for that, the Patwari became a main focus of his revenue reforms. He was the official maintainer of records at the village level. So Patwari's accounts were subject to regular inspection. ठीक है? So as compared to Alauddin Khilji, who had tried to eliminate or uproot the khuts and mukaddams. He had taken away all their privileges also. For example, he had imposed taxes on their lands also. उनसे सारी पावर्स छीन ली थी, रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन की भी पावर्स टू अ ग्रेट एक्सटेंट छीन ली गई थी. Sher Shah Suri, in comparison, adopted a more pragmatic approach. He did not eliminate them, but maintained effective check over the local intermediaries, local khuts and mukaddams. Write down. In local administration, comma, as compared to Alauddin Khilji, comma, Sher Shah Suri adopted a more pragmatic approach. Full stop. Adopted a more pragmatic approach. Full stop. Instead of suppressing the local nobility completely, comma, he maintained effective checks over them. He maintained effective checks over them. He maintained effective checks over them. ठीक है? Next point लिखो. While the khuts and muqaddams retained their traditional roles of revenue collection, policing, and rural justice, comma, they were divested of their role in revenue assessment. Further, excessive taxation or over collection would be the better word. Further, over collection from peasants was prevented by extending legal protections to them in the form of the patta and kabuliyat. When we are discussing the revenue reforms of Sher Shah, ये ज़्यादा clear होगा patta और kabuliyat. Legal protections in the form of the patta and kabuliyat. Additionally, the Patwari's accounts were subject to regular inspections. Right? ठीक है? Was subject to regular inspections. Next sub point लिख सकते हो. Finally, the policing responsibilities of the muqaddams were also modified. Full stop. The principle of local responsibility for local crime made these local officials responsible for the crimes occurring within their jurisdiction. Crimes occurring within their jurisdiction. Okay. So this was Sher Shah's administrative reforms. Next, we have to talk about his economic reforms and miscellaneous reforms, military reforms और law and order reforms. Law and order reforms तो हम ज्यादातर एड्रेस कर चुके हैं. The local responsibility for local crime. यहाँ पे हम एड्रेस कर चुके हैं, इसको दोबारा देख लेंगे थोड़ा डिटेल में. ठीक है. Economic reforms and military reforms in tomorrow's class we'll cover. Now, if there are any doubts, students, you may ask me. Otherwise, I will be ending this lecture.